Good evening, everyone. As we spend time in unity, even while distanced from each other physically, we celebrate the midpoint of this year's SphinxConnect with another visionary. Regarded as one of the most versatile singing artists performing today, baritone Will Liverman continues to bring his compelling performances to audiences nationwide. He will star in the Metropolitan Opera's reopening production of Terence Blanchard's Fire Shut Up in My Bones, in addition to Akhenaten and the Magic Flute's Papageno. From the Los Angeles Opera to Kennedy Center and Carnegie Hall, Will's voice has been heard and felt, both as an artist as well as an activist and a leader. His own new opera, Factorum, written together with DJ and recording artist Kay Rico, is being developed in partnership with the Lyric Opera of Chicago and the Ryan Opera Center. Will is the recipient of the 2020 Marion Anderson Vocal Award, a 2019 Richard Tucker Career Grant, and the highest award bestowed by Sphinx, the Sphinx Medal of Excellence. Expanding into the concert repertoire, Will performed the title role in a concert version of Gershwin's Porgy and Bess with the Montreal Symphony, and in Carmina Burana with the Virginia Symphony Orchestra, as well as in Mozart's Mass with the Civic Orchestra of Chicago. Join Will on stage this evening as another fabulous member of Sphinx's family who will lead us in a conversation. Alexa Smith is the Chief of Staff and Assistant Vice President for Special Initiatives at Manhattan School of Music. Alexa leads workshops and training for student, faculty, and staff on a variety of topics, including diversity, equity, and inclusion on and off stage. She was the Director of Marketing at New York City's Opera and is now an esteemed member of the Sphinx Lead Program, a 2-year professional empowerment initiative designed to evolve the landscape of arts leadership. Herself a professional singer, she has sung with the New York City Opera, CNR Drama, the Martina Arroyo's Foundation Prelude to Performance, Dell'Arte Opera, and Barnard's Theater. A native of Louisville, Kentucky, Alexa resides in Harlem. Ladies and gentlemen, we are so honored to welcome 2 incredible members of La Familia who are so powerfully representing the future and the present of our field. Please welcome Alexa Smith and Will Liverman, our plenary speakers.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Afa, for that warm introduction. I am Alexa Smith, and I'm the Chief of Staff and Assistant Vice President for Special Initiatives at Manhattan School of Music, and also a member of Sphinx Lead's second cohort. I'm joining you tonight from my office in Harlem, where we gather and create as Manhattan School of Music on the ancestral lands of the Munsee Lenape and Wappinger people. Tonight, I am thrilled to be in conversation with Will Liverman. You just heard his numerous accolades from AFA, and we're going to talk about his incredible work as a creator. We'll also hear some musical excerpts where you'll experience his extraordinary artistic range. So welcome, Will. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Hey, Alexa, how are you?
Great.
Yeah,
so
happy to be here.
Yeah. So, as Afa mentioned, you are about to star in a really historic moment at the Met Opera in Terence Blanchard's Fire Shut Up in My Bones. And Terence will be the first Black composer whose piece has been performed at the Met.
Yeah.
And during a time where no one can be on stage, this is a really exciting thing to look forward to.
Mm-hmm.
1 second. Is the audio okay there?
Yeah, I can hear it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really historic moment. He'll be the first Black composer whose work's been performed on that stage. And, how does that feel? What did you think when you learned you were going to be a part of that production? What's going through your mind as you prepare for it?
It was something that it hit me like a fastball out of left field, similarly to a lot of things with this pandemic. But this was, an unexpected, thing. My manager called me and was like, so, the Met wants you to put together, to sing this aria from the opera and record it, and, to see if you would be a good fit for this role. It's going to open the season. And, I hopped up on that piano so fast that, plunked out those notes, and I recorded it. I gave it to Alex, and next thing I know, they're like, the role's yours. It's and it was complete. Joy and excitement, and as you said, it's something that's so important for me, and I'm honored to be a part of it. Because of the fact that, obviously to star on the Met stage, it's a dream come true. But most importantly, to celebrate Terrence and being the first Black composer whose work is going to be featured on that stage. It's something that's super imperative, and it really shows the progress that we need to make, and as we keep pushing opera forward. So it's I really can't wait. Fingers crossed, as with everything, that it does happen. I can't wait to be a part of that.
Well, we will all be popping champagne bottles that night.
Yeah, right.
A big celebration for sure.
Hello.
And one thing about that piece that I think is special, and something you and I have talked about, is the idea of like what it means to be opera. And it's starting to broaden. And Terrence, obviously, he's a phenomenal jazz musician and has scored movies for Spike Lee. And this is not what we typically think of as an opera composer, but of course, Terrence has showed us all that he is. And when I learned about your project, the Factotum, I was thinking the same thing, because obviously you are someone who, for my money, you're the best Figaro out there in Barbieri.
Thank you.
When you were thinking of creating all of this, how did that come to be, the Factotum? And tell us a little bit about that journey to make this.
Yeah, I'll try not to ramble on too much, because it's it's a long story, but I had the idea when I was doing a lot of Barber Sevilles, and I thought it would be an interesting idea to take the idea of the story and put it and update it into a Black barbershop. A Black barbershop, in the Black communities is a place that's, it's a very important part of the community. I've said before, it's something that's more than a haircut. It's a place where we have, important conversations, funny conversations, people going in and out. And sometimes like a sitcom. It's a perfect setup and place to do an opera. And so I had the idea, and I was sitting on it for a while, and then I took it to my friend and collaborator, Rocket Jackson. We actually went to high school together, and he studied opera, and he's a producer and DJ in New York. And I told him about this project idea, and he said, "All right, man, let's get it popping. Let's work on it." I remember we went to this hotel lounge area and spent like 7-8 hours just working on the plot, the characters, so we had something to work off of with the music. And then that was in 2018. And then in 2019, we did a demo with some singers when he moved his studio to Staten Island. So I would take the ferry and just work with him until 2-3 a.m. Sometimes like after rehearsals when I was at the Met, and we just really were passionate about it. And we wanted to really make this happen. And we did the demos to get support, for grants and stuff, because a lot of times they require materials. And long story short, when the pandemic hit, Lyric Opera, they lost their season. And as we were raising money to do our own workshop of this, they reached out and said, like, tell us more about this Factotum project. We're looking for alternative programming. We love the idea. What's the story about? Do you have music? And he's like, well, as a matter of fact, we do. And we gave him the demos and, the list of, the overall plot and the characters. And lo and behold, we ended up workshopping the piece with Lyric this past December. And fingers crossed for that as well. That we're aiming towards a full production at some point in the future. So it's been a real joy to see that come to life and to take that idea and put into action.
Well, congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
squeezing in writing an opera in the middle of all the things you do. And I love the setting. I think so much is so much of what's a part of the discussion right now is how we recover from things. And to have a piece like this that's really about, joy. I mean, the Black Barbershop is a joyful place, and it's special and it's ours. And I really found that interesting, that it's just this little piece of culture that has so many different dynamics.
Yeah. And that's exactly what we were going for. It's, telling an uplifting and lighthearted and, positive, shedding Black people off in a positive light. And, and like you mentioned, just sort of expanding this idea of genre blending and what opera can be. So we mix those musical styles of neo soul, R&B, some jazz, some funk, and the barbershop quartet is sort of like that cohesive unit, sort of like the Greek chorus that, comments on everything. And so, it's been a lot of fun, and we learned so much from the workshop, and, it was a good time. And I can't wait for the documentary to air at I think next week or the week after. So, folks that are listening, can watch that when it comes out and get a little bit of insight into what that week was like and more details about the show.
Well, we'll all be on the lookout for that. We're going to now pivot to our first musical selection for the evening, which is really going to test my rusty German here.
You got it.
So this is Heiterkeit und Fröhlichkeit by Leverman, which you did at Wheaton College, right?
Yep.
All right. So let's take a listen.
Der Abend nieder, da den Kreis der Brüder, wenn Champagner winket, wenn man Jubel trinket, da ertönen meine Sänger, bei der laute frohe Klänge. Heiterkeit und Fröhlichkeit, ihr Götter dieses Lebens, euch zu sehen, zu erfrieren, ist das Ziel des Strebens. O du holde Seligkeit, die des Menschen Herz erfreut, jubelnd ruh ich aus, siehe nie hinaus. O holde Göttin Freude, gib mir immer das Geleite, durch Liebe sei und Wein, zieht die Freude.
Right, that's fantastic. I don't know that piece at all.
Yeah, when I remember I was doing a lot of auditioning, coming out, I always want to find those like off the beaten path arias to do for competitions and concerts and stuff. And I had stumbled across this aria, and I loved it. It's and I love singing in German as well. It's a fun piece.
Yeah, it's got a lot of effervescence and celebration, and love it. So let's talk about some of the other things that you have coming up. I was really excited to see that not only are you singing at Opera Theater St. Louis this summer in William Grant Still's opera, Highway 1, but they've also asked you to curate a Juneteenth concert. And for me, I'm really excited to see all the Juneteenth planning that's happening. It is an important holiday to us and another opportunity outside of February to celebrate Blackness.
Right.
So, and I also saw it as a company saying, we of course love your singing, and here's where that is, but we also want the rest of you to be a part of our season. So what's it looking like curating that? What are some of the things you've come up with?
Oh, it's been so great to collaborate with Nicole on this program, which we're in the midst of doing right now, actually. And, it's so important because it'll be one of the first, if not the first, like big thing that'll happen as we get further, out of COVID. And it's celebrating Black music. And, we're going to hopefully have some elements of dance and spoken word as well, instrumental pieces, some jazz, art song, artists. So just a mix of all these things, and spirituals. And so to be a part of St. Louis, not only make my debut, but to curate this program and to sort of take the reins in the creative process and programming this it's a really cool thing.
Yeah. And did you know Highway 1 at all before they asked you to do it?
I did not, actually. I feel like every time when I learn something or a piece about a Black composer, I'm excited, but also disappointed at the same time that I didn't know about it before. Like, I've discovered so many pieces along the way, like post college, and I didn't know anything about this opera until I was offered it, and that's another. And when I actually thought about it, I'm really excited about the fact that two of the operas that I'll be doing, the Grant Still and the Blanchard, will be done by Black composers. So, it's really like a hopeful thing for me, and it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So going back to your musical roots, I know you grew up in Pentecostal church, which, although it's a little different than singing Rossini in Glass, right? I think the musical language is equally sophisticated, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
And I know during the pandemic, so many artists have said, okay, what else can I offer? What else can I give? Whether that's master classes, voice lessons, but I noticed on your website, you actually offer improvisation lessons.
Yeah. Well, this was another thing that came out of the pandemic. A lot of folks do voice lessons, and I wanted to do something a little different and offer something different. Because like you said, like growing up in the Black church and the Pentecostal church, like, everything is by ear. And when you grow up with it, there's something that's just normal. We have those Yes, Lord hymnals that's like the only thing that you'll find, but no one's looking at the notes going like, do, so, la. Like, we just listen for the words, like we may have our own harmonies. Everything is by rote. Like, and I was never good enough to like play in the church, but I learned a lot by listening over the years. And as I got older and learned, more about theory and progressions, it's really amazing the music that some of these cats are able to do with not being able to read music. So I figured, like, how can I, sort of teach this in a way that, that makes sense, like for folks that understand theory and can maybe have a little bit of piano background. And so that's sort of how this play and improvise class came to be. And it's been a lot of fun. Students have had a good time. We delve into, pop, gospel, R&B, some musical theater, and it strengthens your ear. It's good for, I think it kind of helps, it's definitely helped me, and it made me a well-rounded musician and helped my musicianship a lot. And so it's just something, it's been fun to like learn how to teach that. And it's even, improve my own skills as I, work on the curriculum and come up with different, things for people to work on and practice. So, and it's a lot of fun.
That's great. I love it. And I think, identifying it for yourself as really valuable, all of those hours spent in that musical setting, being as valuable as sitting in the theory class, right?
Right. Yeah.
Different ways of learning similar things, but it's in your body from all that time.
Right. Yeah.
So because I know you flex between all of these musical styles, you also do some arranging, right? So we're gonna listen to one of your arrangements now, which is an arrangement you did of Smile.
One of my favorites.
Yeah, it's a great tune.
Smile, though your heart is aching. aching. When there are clouds in the sky, you'll get by if you smile through your fears and sorrow. Smile and maybe tomorrow you'll see the sun come shining through for you. Light up your face with gladness. Hide every trace of sadness. Although a tear may be ever so near, that's the time you must keep on trying. Smile, what's the use of crying? You'll find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile.
Ah, that was beautiful. Oh my God. Gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
So I want to remind everyone that we are happy to take questions. You can pop them into the Q&A on the right hand of your screen there. And we did get one here I'm going to start with. So let's see. Will, I'm a huge fan, and I'm so excited to see your well-deserved successes. But could you speak to your experiences as a young Black singer navigating problematic productions with almost exclusively white spaces companies?
That's a great question. Personally, I haven't run across a situation where something, was problematic per se, but, for me, I think, even starting from like 2010, I would say, I'm not like a seasoned pro, but I'm not a rookie either. And in the almost near 11 years that I've been, auditioning and performing, 99.9% of the, people that I'm singing for across the table are not Black, So what I do think about is, there's just that feeling of you just can't miss, because I have been in situations in the audition room where people look at me and, and some of these gatekeepers that are, making the decisions, you feel like it's an uphill battle before you've even started to sing, because some people that are making these decisions can't envision a Black lead in a Eurocentric art form. So for me, it was about when I walk into these spaces, I feel, there's no room to just relax, like, oh, I've made it and I can just chill out. Like, you still have to be excellent and be great, because oftentimes, I am the only person of color in the cast. So, I feel that there's a responsibility that I'm not just representing myself, but all Black singers who are not at that company, whether it be an undergrad, grad school, or, working out there. Like, I feel that sort of weight. So, but if you do, if I were to come across something like that, it's important to stand firm in your beliefs and don't be afraid to, hurt to hurt your reputation with the company if it's something that's really something that may be bothering you, or something needs to be addressed. And really standing firm in who you are is the most important thing that I've taken away so far in my career as I've been pursuing opera.
Yeah, and I think think opera, being a stage art form, has its own set of challenges that, for example, the orchestra doesn't. At Sphinx, there's a lot of discussion about diversity in orchestras and things. And when we talk about opera, there is a second layer of storytelling and characters that you're physically embodying. That's really tricky to navigate, on top of most of the time being the only. And, you know, I think it's really hard for folks to understand that time when rehearsal's over, you know, it's not your time off yet. Until your head hits the pillow, you have to be on and excellent.
You have to be on and excellent. You can't miss, especially starting off when you're trying to make a name for yourself. You have to, you know, have that mentality walking in, because, you know, some situations, even in the audience, it's an uphill battle before you even open your mouth. And I'm singing, you know, the lead role of Figaro somewhere. People are like, oh, well, this is not believable, and they, you know, they've shut you out before you even open up your mouth to sing the first note. You know, so it's really walking into that mentality in the audition room, in the rehearsal room, and on stage. You know, there's no room to relax and show up late, not having your music learned. Like, you have to be excellent at all times.
Yeah, and the believable thing is always funny to me, because here we are in a theater with people singing at each other in languages that most of the time they don't speak fluently.
Yeah,
so, like, the thing that's unbelievable is like that you should be Figaro.
I know. That's the thing. You know, like, that's exactly it. You know, some folks can't get past the color, and that's all they see. And, you know, and that's, as we continue to tell different stories on stage, that's how we bring, you know, push the culture forward, is making it more inclusive and making it something that's normal, where it's not just just the one Black person in the cast, or the, you know, it's, you know, we really have to strive for that change.
So another question here: as a highly sought after artist, how do you decide which organizations and artists to work with? Is there some kind of criteria or standard you hold them to, particularly in terms of their track record with DEI? Complicated, very complicated.
Yeah. I mean, in my experience, is like, work is work. So when manager comes calling and he's like, hey, there's an opportunity for you to sing whatever role, 9 times out of 9, it's, you know, like, I haven't come across a situation where there's been, you know, an institution where I'm like, ooh, I don't know if I want to, you know, perform for this company. But to be honest, you know, I guess, you know, the more that I've advanced in my career, the more selective I can be about, you know, places I want to work for, like being smart in, you know, I want to make a debut here that I haven't made. So versus like taking a gig that I've already, you know, done before with a different company. But starting out, you know, you kind of have to take, everything you get to get your foot in the door first. And yeah, that's sort of how it's been for me.
Yeah, I think that's real. I mean, it's work, and I think you have had a lot of success now, which offers you other opportunities to speak up, to have a platform.
Exactly. Yeah.
And how do you think about, you know, looking back on your time in school? You went to some wonderful institutions. Are there things you look back on now and maybe wished were different, or wish people understood more? I'm thinking in repertoire. Did you have moments where teachers were like, oh, this would sound great in your voice, but I don't know if you're castable? Did you have those moments along the way?
You know, if they did happen, I didn't know about it, but like, you could, you know, I think, even going back to, well, in school, like, I, you know, when I was at Wheaton, I was like one of 2 baritones, so I got like all the roles there. But for grad school, I actually sang the role of James Meredith in this show called Camillatone, and, you know, he was the first Black accepted into Ole Miss, and all of the backlash that he, you know, faced from that. And of course, you had to have someone Black to sing it, but it was a moment where I felt, you know, proud to portray that role. And in terms of like other situations, like I haven't really run across that, but definitely in the business though, going back to what I said about, how it's an uphill battle and how some folks can't really envision having a Black lead in an opera. You may say that's wrong, but I always say the receipts are in the casting. You look back at years past of the same, like no diversity, like that's all you have to look, to see that's just an ongoing thing at some of these places. So, it can be a challenge to break your foot in the door and to, name me a Black baritone who's done, who's known for Don Giovanni or Eugene Onegin, those leading type of roles. We just, we still have a ways to go with that.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
So thinking about last summer when Arts Institute started making their statements, which we all read and we were all waiting every day, like which one's coming out today?
Yeah.
Some were better than others.
Yeah.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I'm curious how you felt in that time when you were watching gigs being canceled, things happening in our culture, and then the statements happening. Were there places where you knew you worked before and you knew that it was real, or you were curious about it, or how did that lay on you as those things started to happen?
It was a lot. That was, like I said, the roller coaster time when we're losing work, and then George Floyd had happened, and all these things that uprooted a lot of stuff in the classical world. In terms of inclusion and diversity. And one way it kind of made me upset that it had to take this, everyone to just be seated and not doing anything to really realize the problems that we've been saying for years and years, not only with what it's like to be Black in America, but also the changes that we've needed to have in terms of the inclusion of Black artists in the classical world. So on one hand, I was mad about it, but on the other hand, I'm like, well, we are at least finally having these conversations. And I really believe that some of these companies are putting these statements into action. But to be honest, that remains to be seen until we actually get back to work, because it's one thing to make the statement, but when things actually get back to normal and we'll actually see what, the folks that have stood by these statements, if it's going to be eventually, like when things settle down, will it go back to normal, or are we actually going to, do something to create long lasting change? So it's still a question mark for me until we get back to normal.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And another question we had come up was, how do you see yourself as an artist fitting into that work? Do you see it as just performing? Obviously you do lots of other things, but in terms of the anti-racism work, where do you see yourself fitting into that in the industry?
The anti-racism, for me, it's just, I guess, I see myself, for me, it's about being an advocate as much as I can. It made me want to use my platform as much as I could to bring up these issues of diversity, which I probably hadn't done so much in the past, but it really put that fire under me to do that, and to also be a creator. I think that's one thing as musicians. We're musicians, but we're also creative. Even if we're looking at someone else's music, we're taking that music and we're processing it and making our own thing with it. So we're all creative. So it kind of sparked that, that thing of well, we can tell our own stories. We have the minds, we have the brilliant minds, the resources to, take the reins, and we don't need permission. If companies don't want to act right, fine. Well, we're gonna move forward and do this thing ourselves. So I've been really encouraging people. I'm living proof of, putting those ideas on paper, stories that you are really passionate about that haven't been told, and that you want, issues that you want to bring up. You have, I think what it takes to do it is just a matter of putting those ideas into action. And that's something that I've, really been striving towards lately and really been passionate about.
And the idea of, first of all, as artists, as creators, and even as administrators, like it should be really natural for us to get creative and find solutions.
Yeah, right.
Through the arts, like
Yeah, right.
Of creation. So, and I do think there's so many wonderful artists who are rising up to take on that task.
Absolutely.
And creating beautiful things that are helpful to the discussion. And, giving it to folks to see it in a different light. I watched the Heartbeat Opera's Breathing Free, I think it's called, which uses incarcerated folks as part of the video, and Fidelio. I mean, it's blown away by this, all digital.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's beautiful what can happen in a time like this.
Right, and that's what I think we have to keep striving towards, not to discredit like the standards and the great like operas that are out there, but we have to make room and continue to push this creativity and this idea of telling our stories, taking ownership of that. And not being afraid to do that. And I think this, one of the silver linings, I guess, of this pandemic has opened up our world. Like we're kind of forced to, we've been shoved in a corner. It's like either we change what's happening in this business, or it's not going to get better. We have to push it forward.
That's right. Another question coming in here: what can an arts organization do for BIPOC artists and staff to help them not feel like they have to be on and excellent all the time? Make the workplace more comfortable. So what are those things that would make you feel like you can relax a little bit?
That's a great question. I mean, for the longest time, that's like always been sort of the mentality that I go into. So I haven't even thought of a time where I, like what would help that. And I think, part of it, I mean, right off the bat, what I think of is just the diversity in the casting.
Yeah.
Being able, because I automatically, when I'm the only Black person in a cast, feel that weight of the representation, because, when those folks in the audience look at me, I feel that. And so, it's just for me, the inclusion on all sides, not just even the performing, but in our artistic, even within the board. I mean, that's really where a lot of this, change, I think, needs to happen. And for us to really strive towards diversity on all sides of the table, finding Black supporters and building the diversity in our boards and our donor base, because the Black supporters are out there, but they're going to support things that when they see, companies that are making that change, they'll get behind it. And I think we have to find ways to bring in more Black support into these companies to really bring change.
I agree completely. And seeing a face that looks like yours when you come in a room, always allows you to relax a little bit.
That's why, I mean, this is one of the reasons why people have so much fun doing Poor Game Best or something like that, because it's like
it's a party.
It's a part, like we all are, great, excellent artists all coming together when you have, that there, and it's just that's what that is.
Yeah, and because of that thing, we were talking earlier about like it's like a miracle that Black artists make it. It's a miracle given all the things that happen just in a day of going to rehearsal that are stressful or hold you back just a little bit at a time.
Right.
It's a miracle that you're gonna be on that Met stage.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't have to be a miracle.
That's the thing. I feel like I shouldn't, and in some ways I shouldn't have to feel a responsibility to represent like all Black artists are out there, but it's just, I feel that that's something, I have to do when you're the only one or one of a few, or if you're even the first Black person the company has hired even.
Right.
So many folks were so surprised. They're like, oh, you're the first Black Papageno at the Met, and how many performances they've done it. It's another example of, the receipts. The folks, have all, said that, and it's we have to push towards that. That's
right.
Yeah.
Right. Another question that's great, and I think ties into this, is how would you recommend that we bring young people who can't afford enriching experiences of lessons and youth ensembles into the art form? And I want to drop in something I heard in a session earlier today with Mark from Kennedy Center. Is the idea of, you and I coming into the Met, and typically there doesn't feel like it's our people there, right?
Yeah, right.
Mark was talking about, Black people ask, like, who all gonna be there?
Yeah. Who all? Exactly.
It's like, I remember going to the opening of Porgy last year, and the fashion was dominated by like these beautiful Black women. And it felt like, oh, this is like I could be me that night,
Right.
And, it shouldn't just have to be on the Porgy and Best night.
Right, exactly. But that's the one example that we see. Exactly. And honestly, I remember I saw the dress of the Porgy at the Met, and to see so many Black kids in that audience that are enjoying the show, that are experiencing opera for the first time, and Porgy and Bess, of course, gets a bad rap. It's like it's showing off, Black people in a certain light, but it's just like, it's just one story. We need to, that's why, that's a big reason to answer that question, like why I, wanted to create something like Factotum, to make it more inclusive and tell different stories, and to sort of relate to young kids on, a musical language that they understand, and bringing in, I know I'm realizing like there's lots of great shows and new works out there that also are doing the same thing, but we just need more of it,
Yeah.
And for these companies, they have to get really, really involved in their own communities to they're continuing to work in that direction to get young people involved and interested in the art form.
That's right. Well, I want to pivot to yet another amazing thing you've managed to pull off during this time, which is your new album.
Yeah.
So your new album is called Dreams of a New Day, Songs by Black Composers. And it's out today. It's out, right?
It's out February 12th. You can pre-order now.
Okay.
But if not, it'll be out there on all the streaming platforms. I mean, no one buys CDs anymore. I mean, so it's like you can just listen to it on your phone. Yeah. Yeah.
So talk about the composers that you chose for this album, because I noticed in looking at all the pieces you picked, they really were a collection of newness to me for the most part. And I really appreciated that I wasn't going to pick it up and know all the things that were on there. So talk a little bit about those composers.
Yeah, and that's the main thing I wanted to do. Even going back to what I was saying, like I didn't know anything about, had Grant Still had written an opera, like I wanted to highlight Black composers for their contributions in art song. Because I mean, I didn't really know, I maybe knew like 2 or 3 art songs while I was in school by Black composers. So I really wanted to highlight that. And I wanted to base it around a new commission. I mean, just going full circle of finding ways to tell our stories. I commissioned Shano Pebolo, who's a great friend of mine and a Chicago-based composer. I run across this poem called Ballot of Birmingham. And it just struck me to my core about the Birmingham bombing, especially growing up in church myself and really taking a look at that, talking to my dad who lived through that time. And so he set that poem, and then he had the idea of doing a parallel to the Charleston shooting that happened, and then he commissioned Marcus to write Rain, and so that's how this song cycle, Two Black Churches, came to be, which was the focal point of the album. And then from there, I wanted to represent the composers of now. So Shano Pebolo and Damian Sneed, super brilliant and dope composer. I was introduced to his work through, Lawrence Brownlee's Reimagined Spirituals. Margaret Bonds was important to highlight, being a Black female composer receiving, national recognition, and her work with Langston Hughes. And the Three Dream Portraits just fit into the Two Black Churches and the story that I'm trying to tell with the album. And of course, I props to Henry Burley, who, paved the way for a lot of Black soloist, actually, with the way that he would write spirituals in a way that they could be classically sung.
Yeah.
So it gave a lot of opportunities for Black singers to have like concert careers. And so I wanted to highlight him, but also, highlight his art songs, because the 5 songs of Lawrence Hope is one of my favorite song cycles. And so I think that's pretty much like the meat and potatoes of, and Robert Owens. I tried to find Mortal Storm. I couldn't find that anywhere, like the whole song cycle. So like you said, I wanted to bring some of these pieces to life that we don't, really hear all the time, or if ever,
Yeah. That's great. Well, we're going to hear a little bit of The Rain. Before that, I just want to remind everyone that they can put in their questions here. This will be our last musical piece, and then we're going to get to some more questions. So this is from Two Black Churches, The Rain.
When the reality of racism returns, all joy treads water, emotions of buried emotion. When the reality of racism returns, Charleston is doing everything it can to only swim in a colorless liquid of calm sea and blind faith. But in the low country, in utter rain, of ancient tears, suffocating through floods of segregation. When a murderer's gunshots made waves at
Wow, that is stunning.
Yeah, Thank you. That was when Sean wrote that, like I could not sing the first like 4 times I tried to sing this cycle, I couldn't get through without crying. Like
Yeah.
it was, I mean, the way he said it just really tells the story. And again, like having my own personal experience in church and thinking about the church members that are close to me and envisioning, I mean, I can't envision something like that happening at my own church, but it's just like brings up all that emotion, and it's a very powerful cycle.
Yeah, and I love the way you use your own voice, especially at the end. It has that flavor to it of being in church, and really feel that. That's I can't wait to listen to this. So great. We have a couple more questions that have come in. What are some of the projects or initiatives you see happening in the classical music community right now that excite you?
Oh, wow. There's actually so much out there now, which is great. You got folks that are doing lots of, digital, like video things and creating all types of new works, more commissions coming out. I really can't trying to pinpoint just one thing, but I mean, it's like I said, it's been great to see with the silver lining with this pandemic, how we have to find ways to reinvent and be creative. And I'm trying to think of something that's that I've I mean, there's honestly been a lot of things since last summer till now.
Yeah.
It really inspires me too when I do see it, because it's just something that continues to motivate my own work and to as we all push to drive things forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say working at an education institution, I've been really surprised at how motivated students are, even with imperfect year. I think everyone at the beginning, we were really worried, like, oh, are they going to adhere to the guidelines and masking and all of that? But in the end, of course they are, because all they want to do is make music. Happy, they're sitting in their dorm room doing class and then going for that half-hour rehearsal, but that half hour means everything.
Right. Yeah.
It's a seriously imperfect way to have school, but it really has created a different type of opportunity that we wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Right.
I've seen so much good art that's happened because of the circumstance. And I'm glad we all got away from well, it's not the same if you do this. Like, well, we know it's not the same.
I know.
We're trying to make something,
Yeah.
So, and it's yet to be seen what will stick around of that. I, for one, don't want to lose all of it. I think a lot of it has been helpful.
No, I think, and look, I mean, I've missed live performance dearly, and listening to Act One and going at intermission, that person was flat. I mean, not to like talk, but just like, come on, let's be real. Like it's just being around other people, experiencing something live together, having a drink, and just, I miss that voice soaring over an orchestra at me live and those goosebumps that you get. But I think that with this pandemic, it opens up our world to, like, we can also have something digital to increase our audience bases, because so many young folks, you want to talk about like how we get young folks into it. Everyone is on their phones. Like they access Spotify, iTunes. I think opera companies need, Spotify pages. We need to make these performances accessible in some way. I hope we take that, as something that we learn from this pandemic, that we can have the live performance, but investing in making digital content too. The Met shouldn't be the only one doing HD. We need to have other companies like really stepping up and getting their own content out there, because there's so many great performances that that should be made accessible, so if people can listen to it at home, and then maybe the next time they decide like, oh, I really enjoyed La Boheme, I want to go see it in theaters next time it happens, you know?
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I totally agree. Another question here. This has been a great interview and wonderful performances. Couldn't agree more. My question, when you chat to BIPOC friends who are orchestral instrumentalists, do you think they face different kinds of job discrimination to those facing opera singers, which you talked a little bit about, but
Yeah.
how do your friends in the instrumental world relate?
You know, I actually can't speak so much to the only difference is, of course, with the performing, like we had said earlier, you know, it's a visual thing. Like the minute you walk in, they know who you are, and, you know, can make a decision like that before you've even had a chance to perform. Where I know is like, I don't know so much about the, you know, the orchestral world and how it works, but, you know, some auditions are I guess like blind auditions. Exactly. But in terms of how folks are treated, you know, I can imagine that there are a lot of instrumentalists of color who've run across, you know, racism or things, offhanded thing that someone said at a donor event or something. You know, like there's all sorts of different things that we run across, but I can't pinpoint something super specific with another a friend of color in the instrumental world. But I'm sure it's, you know, that everyone has their own experience, you know.
Yeah, I think that audition experience is really one of the biggest differences.
Yeah.
And not to say that one is better than the other. It's just,
right.
You know, for opera, we've declared it something visual, so that's how we audition.
Right.
Which pros and cons there for sure.
You're right. Right.
Then another question is about the idea of allyship. So how is the role of being an ally as an institutional body different to being an ally as an individual? It's interesting. So institutions, I assume predominantly white institutions who are heralding, you know, artists of color versus what folks are doing on the individual level.
Yeah. To me, I think it is about the individual work that you have to do as an ally, whether that's, you know, having conversations with non-people of color about it, you know, is an important thing, and finding ways to make change and to think about things differently, because it does start with the individual, and so I know that was one of the first things that popped in my head. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing I really want to get to here is the idea of management and agencies, and how, you know, sometimes they have their own problematic tendencies to how they think about casting. Or how have you found it helpful in dealing with management, and, you know, others, you know, who have different management? How have you found those conversations to be?
I don't know. It's an interesting thing. It's sort of in that same world of, you know, like some of these gatekeepers can immediately, you know, decide whether or not, like, oh, this person is, you know, because you look a certain way, you're not going to get as much work as this person who looks great for all these roles. For me, I try my best to be in charge of all the things that I have control over, really. And so whether that's, you know, working on languages, figuring out ways to improve upon the last audition. I mean, knowing, of course, that these things are out there, but you know, that was my mentality when I was, you know, starting out, was, you know, knowing these things exist. And with agents, you just have to go into that audition room and be super confident in who you are, and don't apologize for who you are. And, you know, continue to find ways to improve upon the things that you have control over, and try. I mean, it's a cliche. Don't worry about the rest, but like, it's, you know, I think more, I mean, I will say like more and more agents, I mean, I'm seeing slightly more like folks of color on rosters, which is good. So I think some agencies are really finally getting the picture. So I think we're heading in the right direction. And I hope we keep heading in that direction. Like I said, I think it remains to be seen until we get back to normal. But like, take this time while you have all this time off to come out of the gate from this pandemic ready to sing your face off, like up and down, all around, like get prepared, because there is going to be an end date to this pandemic. And if you're sitting around, like, I mean, we all deal with this pandemic in our own way. And it's like, we have days where it's just like, you don't want to do anything. You can't find the motivation. But if you really are, serious about this and you want to continue pursuing it, take this time to really hone in your craft, learn a language. I've been struggling on Babbel now, trying to like learn Italian, because I'm tired of translating every single thing from, like I want to get better at that and become better myself, instead of thinking of ways to complain about something. You like find those things. I mean, be aware of those things, but find ways that you can better yourself, especially now we have all this time to do it. Because that's only going to help. Yeah.
Turn up that metronome a tick. And
turn it up.
Try again.
120. Quarter note equals 120. Turn it up.
Oh man, I love it. I love it. Trying to get to so many questions. They're great. So a question about your repertoire, and if you ever feel pigeonholed, or I'm thinking, I know you did that wonderful Porgy that was concert, right, with orchestra. Is that something you think about doing on stage? And I think, with Black opera singers always, the Porgy question, like if you are a Porgy, if you are a Bess, it's, as you know, it's a decision to put that in your repertoire. I'm not saying that's right or fair.
Right.
But those things can be a decision. How do you think about that?
It's very, very tricky, because like I said, at the end of the day, we're performers, and those coins are important when you are faced with a decision like, do I take another Porgy or not? Like, I don't want to be seen in this light. But you have to be very smart about how you go about your career. I mean, like I try to just be super, I have, to keep my package or my repertoire super varied. So yes, I can sing, a role in Porgy, but I also can do Mozart and Rossini. So keeping that in mind, because that becomes kind of a tricky thing, in terms of, getting pigeonholed into one thing. But I don't know. I think I've, tried to just be really smart about how you go with, taking work, or making sure that you are highlighting all the other things that you do well as a performer too. So I think that's, I don't know.
And I'm wondering, now you're going to have these other roles. You're going to have Fire, and you're going to have Highway 1. And suddenly you have a suite of things.
Right. Well, I remember Eric Owens said he didn't take Porgy for the longest time because he wanted to make sure that he was known for other things first, and then later on he did it, so he's shown that he can do other things, and I can also sing Porgy and Bess. And of course, Porgy is a beautiful show, but we have to find ways to, and look, and that's some of that you can do post, spend the money and invest in a great video recording of yourself and put that out there on Instagram, and, doing things, finding ways to not waiting for permission to do this, like promote yourself, like if you have this great aria or something that you're really proud of and you want to show out there, like show that, like put that out there, Yeah.
And I also think what starts to feel like upsetting is that, it is just Porgy.
Yeah, right.
That's the piece. And, when I worked at City Opera, when I started there and I'm, researching the history of the company, they did William Grant Still's opera Troubled Island in 1949.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, all right. And they were like, okay, we're going to do the first opera by a Black person at a major house.
Yeah.
And what? And then nothing happened. I mean, and between now and then, it's so many years. But I do feel like now, with the discoveries that people have made, overdue, but they're here.
Yeah, right.
But I don't know what Highway 1 sounds like. I have no idea. I love Still, so I'm sure it's beautiful, but there's going to be lots of new sounds for us to pick from. And so I hope that lessens that having to choose to or not to Porgy.
Exactly. And we have to give these works a chance. And, you know, I mean, it's another thing about new works too. And like, what, you know, it's sometimes these works come out, but then we never see them again. And maybe what all it needs to happen is it just needs to be revised or something, or like, let's tweak this, let's like add to the story like they used to do back then. There's so many like unsuccessful operas that are now like the war horses of today. I feel like we, you know, especially, you know, new works of today, we have to make room for them, but also really give them a chance so they can stick around and be in that in the standard rep that we put into rotation.
Yeah, that's right. Because there's plenty of other works out there that have been revised or done and still criticized. I remember doing Candide at City Opera, which we did with Hal Prince. Still, people were like, "Oh, Candide is so imperfect. It's just so." And okay, well, you're fine doing it, so why not try something else too?
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So let's see. Wow, this is really interesting. It was a revelation to listen to your voice singing Russian. Are there roles in Russian you would like to be singing? Also, Peleus. Very specific, but just the idea of your voice singing Russian is a revelation. Going back to that Onegin thing you were saying.
Yeah. It's that Eurocentric mentality. Like this, just like, man, a Black person singing this role or this sort of style or this language. Like, and that was, for Russian, the language is something that just really suits my voice. And while I didn't have a lot of work coming out of the Ryan Center, I, you know, really studied a lot of Russian repertoire. And I mean, I love singing in Russian. And so it's, you know, I would love to sing Eugene Onegin one day. It's a dream role. And I put that out there in the universe. I mean, I recorded the aria and I put it out there, you know, like, hey, this is what I would like to sing. And I think that's one of the ways in which you can be proactive. You know, don't wait for people to, you know, if you feel like you really have something to offer, you know, and you feel good about it, put that out there. And Peleus also, I don't know who's wrote this question, but they know all the things. Peleus is another dream role this beautiful music. I mean, come on. But yeah, I mean, definitely some Eugene Onegin and Peleus for sure. One day.
One day. But it's in the universe now, so.
Exactly, yeah.
So a great question about your personal musical heroes, because we know representation is important to us as we're growing into our musical selves. Who are those musical heroes to you when you were coming up as a young person?
The first one has to be Mr. Robert Brown, the late and great Robert Brown, should I say. He was our high school teacher in Governor School. And the arts world, we had this conversation about Governor School. Governor School was where I learned about opera as a high schooler. And our teacher there, he was a larger than life figure. He was someone who was my musical father. And sadly, he passed away. But he was someone that I looked up to as another Black man who was just he had so much knowledge and so much to give. And he encouraged me to pursue a career in opera. So he's always with me, but sometimes I'm backstage. I can hear his voice now. Don't be late on this phrase, Liverman. You know, like I just hear those little like gems as he's looking down, like, you know, he was the one that instilled that, you know, being prepared and all of that. Yeah. I would say Marion Anderson is another one that comes to mind. You know, hear someone who's broke down so many barriers, all the while like fighting for civil rights. I mean, it blows my mind to think about artists, Black artists in those times that are being excellent and striving to have these careers and dealing with coloreds and whites, dealing with just the blatant hatred and racism, and being activists and help paving the way for artists like myself to perform today. So, yeah.
Yeah, those are great. Yeah, I think going back to a couple folks ask about, resources growing up, and Governor School is one of those places in a lot of states. It's free. It's funded by states, and it's a really in-depth musical experience for a lot of young people. I also had a Black teacher at Governor School who actually had Fach class for us.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Love it. Come on, Fach class.
Yes. And he would play the bestest. He would play, we'd do sopranos, and then we figure we go into mezzos, and he'd ask us, and then it would be a countertenor, and no one had ever heard a countertenor.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And he brought, the one year I went, he brought Angela Brown to do a recital.
Oh, I love Angela Brown.
Yes, she did our opera from a sister's point of view. And it was like so validating to see someone like that come out and sing Di Toyahala, and then, do her other stuff, do spirituals and all kinds of stuff,
Yeah.
Special times can be made at programs like that, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, that's for me, that's how, as a young person, having known nothing about opera, I would have never even thought to pursue opera. It was because of that school, and having that opportunity to go to this free school that offered operatic training. I mean, I didn't, a lot of folks are doing musicals and stuff in high school, and here I am like, oh, I did Figaro and Marriage of Figaro. I sing Horace Tabor in Ballot of Baby Doe at age 17. All these crazy roles like that. As a high school, you think it's normal because you don't know any. I mean, it's just like you're just singing and performing. But right. I mean, our resume was stacked by the time we got to college. Like, we had done Carmina, Messiah, cabaret concerts, everything. Like, Zoroastro was my role debut at age 13. I remember I had my eyes closed, having to do the dialogue, like trying to hit Magic Flute. But those experiences really gave me a love of opera as a young Black kid. And, what was beautiful was seeing the diversity in that, because there's so many young Black opera singers in the program, some of which are performing now. Ryan Speedo Green, Frederick Valentine, Crystal Williams, Adam Richardson. We all went to this Governor School at the same time.
Wow, that's so special. Wow. We are almost at time, but there's one question here that I think will be great to send us off with. Can you speak to the idea of artistic excellence? Wow,
that's a great question. I think it's, for me, a matter of being your true authentic self, being true to yourself, working, just always being a student of your craft, and knowing, at least for me, that they're just setting that bar for yourself, was the mentality I always had walking into auditions. Always trying to find ways to, even if I had a good audition, I would try and find ways to be like, okay, this was good, but what can I improve upon to make it even better the next time? I think it's a matter of always learning, because the minute you think, oh, I figured it out, I can sing this high note, so can't nobody tell me nothing. I know how to out saying everybody. Like, then it's done, because once you think you've learned everything and you have it all. I mean, that's the difference between that and, of course, I think you should love your voice and your artistry, and you have to be your biggest fan, but you also have to realize that you can never stop learning. And coming into that rehearsal and that performance with the confidence in yourself that you can achieve this and you can do it. So I don't know if that really answers it, but that's what came to mind.
I think that's great. I think all of us being open to learning is what's really going to move the needle. All of us together. Unity, right?
Yes. Yeah. There we go.
Great. Well, Will, this has been incredible. Congrats for all of the work you've been doing. Can you tell us one more time where we can learn more about the factotum and where the documentary will be?
So the documentary, when it airs, they haven't given us a specific date. It should be within the next week or 2 weeks, and you check out lyricopera.org, and you can find it there. And I'm sure they'll have it on YouTube as well, but that's like a good place to find it fast. And yeah, check it out.
Great. And your album is out next month, right?
February 12th, Black History Month.
Yeah.
Go check it out.
Well, thank you, Will. This has been wonderful. Thank you to the audience for being a part of this extra special SphinxConnect plenary. And we will see you all tomorrow for more wonderful panels and plenary tomorrow with Damien Sneed.
I love Damien.
Right?
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.